Good morning. Welcome to the Trent England Show. Glad to have you watching this Thursday morning. Glad to be here. It is the second week of the legislative session here in Oklahoma, and we have a whole bunch of stories. It has not been a good week. It's sort of the last day of the second week because whatever happens today, there may be some votes on what people call cash and cuts to solve what's left of the current budget. That's the fiscal year 2018 budget, the budget that goes through the end of June. There may be some of that done today, and then at some point the legislature will leave town for the weekend. At least many members of the legislature will leave town for the weekend at some point later on today. We'll, of course, be back with you tomorrow, Friday morning. But it's been a bad week for the Fallin Administration. I'm going to describe why in just a minute. A couple of things that we've talked about in the past that I just want, they popped up in the news yesterday. I wanted to share these with you because you may not have seen them. Walmart got some praise around the beginning of January this year because they are this year raising wages for hourly workers, raising the starting wage for workers in their stores. They're doing that because they're competing for workers. They're competing for workers' longevity, right? One of the things that gets missed oftentimes in debates about how much workers get paid is that firms care a lot about getting, reliable workers who will stay with them. That's one of the reasons why stores like Walmart try to pay people what is competitive for whatever the skill set is. Anyhow, so Walmart raised wages. They also got some flack because just after they announced that decision, they also made the decision to close some stores. And now, breaking news yesterday was that Walmart is going to be trimming the middle management ranks of its store, its employees in each store. Why is this news? Why is this important? This is really important because this is the kind of story that politicians have no idea what it means, right? Like I said, they got some blowback when they decided to close some stores, even though they're raising employee wages, right? They're also right here actually shifting. I mean, you could think about this as Walmart shifting pay from middle management to starting workers. Starting workers are going to make more, but Walmart cannot go out and just demand that customers pay more. Right? And Walmart cannot just run a deficit. They can't do those two things. What are the things that government does to allow it to be irresponsible? Government either raises taxes or runs a deficit, right? Walmart can't do, and I'm not, I'm calling out Walmart because they're the one that's in the news. Every business operates this way. Every business has a bottom line. Every business has to make hard choices. And you know what? As businesses compete, at the end of the day, employment expands, workers make more money, standards of living go up. That has been the history in the United States, and it's been so dramatic in the United States that even little penny-ante countries around the world benefit. Our prosperity slops over and allows countries that choose to be socialist, that choose to be less competitive, to actually see their standards of living go up because they benefit from the prosperity and the innovations created right here in the United States of America. So don't ever let anybody tell you, well, look over, that over there in Denmark or wherever, over there in Norway, that's all my reindeer herding ancestors came from places like that. Over there, they have a kind of a socialist system, but they live as well as we do. They live almost as well as we do because they benefit from all the things created in the United States, and then we actually let those things go out around the world, and people benefit from them all around the world. And look, one of the things being a conservative means, I talked about this a little bit yesterday, being a conservative means understanding that government is, because it's a monopoly, it is always less efficient. That doesn't mean that we can dispense with it. There are certain things we need government to do, but it means we should always be attentive to the fact that government doesn't exist in a world with market pressures. Okay, so good for Walmart operating in the marketplace. Good for state government. This just breaking news out this morning, the new general revenue fund numbers for Oklahoma out. And I have them in front of me here. We did once again in the month of January, beat the estimate. So let me sketch out for you how this works. This is really important because the legislative session is going on. Some of them want to raise your taxes, and this makes it less likely. This makes it harder for them to explain why. the state had already predicted, right? The budget is based on predictions about how much tax revenue and other revenue will come into the state. The state had already predicted that it would bring in about $40 million more revenue this January 2018, than it did in January 2017. So the prediction already was, it makes sense. The economy was already improving when they made those predictions. So they predicted that they would bring in more revenue than they actually brought in the previous January. However, not just $40 million more, but about $50 million more, almost $50 million more, for a grand total of just over $90 million more money coming into the state to the state's coffers in this January that just concluded versus a year before. That is extra money that the state has. Now, I mean, look, the state has bills to pay, and because of the illegal cigarette tax the tax increase that was passed in the last session, there are lingering challenges with the budget. I know all that, but at the end of the day, we now know that the state has $50 million more, and the projections for the next budget year. So that's so the cash on hand, the cash that actually just came through the door, it literally is in possession now of Oklahoma state government, right? That's the number that we just got. That money makes a difference for the current budget, but it also means that the revenue projections for the next budget are likely to be even higher, and those revenue projections come out next week. We'll talk about those, explain what they mean to the legislative session, and yes, even to your pocketbook next week on the Trent England Show here. But that is good news for the state of Oklahoma. However, it has been a tough week for Governor Mary Fallin because on Monday, she had endorsed the Step Up Oklahoma tax increase plan. It included her $1.50 per pack cigarette tax increase, which she has made the sort of the focal point of her second term in office. It was something she tried to do during her first term in office too, but it really has become the focal point of her second term in office. A $1.50 per pack cigarette tax increase. Nobody knows where she got that number. We've talked on the program here before about why that number is a bad. I mean, if you want to raise cigarette taxes, that's actually a bad number. You can demonstrate why that is. We've done that before. I'm not going to do that this morning. But the governor on Monday, of course, lost that vote. That went down. It did not even receive, I mean, not only did it not receive the 75% that they wanted so that they would not have to send it to a vote of the people, it didn't even receive 2/3, which would have been a kind of a moral victory for the folks who were pushing that tax increase, because they have said that the threshold really should be 2/3. It shouldn't be 3/4 to pass a tax increase without sending it to a vote of the people in Oklahoma, and they didn't even meet that threshold, right? So they sort of failed their own. They tried to set a lower bar, and they failed to meet even the lower bar. So that was tough on the governor. There are people talking about sending it to a vote of the people. I'd be surprised if they really do that. I think it would go down in flames, even worse than the Boren tax hike plan did a couple of years ago. But we'll see. We'll follow that for you here on the show. So that was Monday. And then we had news about Preston Dorflinger, who has been one of the governor's two closest confidants. Preston Dorflinger, I mean, this is the sort of thing that's sort of open secret within the Capitol, but until things get reported in the media, they're not real, right? Did you know that? I mean, everybody in the Capitol can know something, but unless it appears in the media, it's like it's not real, right? And they get to act like it's not a real thing, right? And so Preston Dorflinger, it came out that there were not one, but two 911 calls reporting domestic violence, one police report reporting domestic violence this years ago, just before he joined the Fallin Administration. This led to him resigning from his position as interim director of the Oklahoma State Department of Health. That happened this week. And then yesterday, News 6 in Tulsa reporting on the governor's other closest confidant, Denise Northrup. There was a gentleman who had been trying to meet with the governor, Wes Bledsoe, who has a group that advocates for seniors in Oklahoma. And he had been trying to get a meeting with the governor and kept being put off. Not told no, but just put off in a way that he finally determined was, I mean, this is me reading between the lines a little bit here, but he finally determined that this was a little bit disrespectful, and he wanted to know what was going on. And I've got to give Wes Bledsoe deserves all kinds of credit, because not only did he file a public records request. This is, you know what, you let me know, but I would love to take one of our Trent England shows at some point. We'll bring in an expert. We'll talk about how you do this. Anybody can do this. You can do this. File a public records request to get records from state government. So Wes Bledsoe said, look, they haven't been getting back to me. I'm just going to file a public records request and find out why. If they won't talk to me, they won't tell me why, they keep putting me off, I'm going to find out what they're saying behind the scenes. Did you know you could do that? He did that. And of course, it took several years before they released the records. That in itself is a travesty. And really, I mean, people miss how just disrespectful to the public it is when government agencies do this, right? They have an obligation to produce the records. They should produce them as quickly as possible. We see all the time in Oklahoma where agencies drag these things out because they want the records, if they're going to be finally released, they want it to be so far in the future that it's not relevant anymore. That's what they try to do. It is illegal when they do that, by the way. It's illegal, but they do it anyway, and judges do basically nothing. Unfortunately, he finally got the records, and this is, can we put up there the screenshot? This is from News 6 in Tulsa, News on 6 in Tulsa. So Denise Northrup receiving these requests to meet for a meeting with the governor from this elder care advocate, her internal reaction to this was, ugh. Which, as a colleague pointed out to me, there have been other public records requests that have gathered up emails from Denise Northrup, and this is actually a popular comment of hers about people who have suggestions for the governor, people who pass information on to the governor, people who want to talk to the governor. It turns out more and more as we get the records from the Fallin administration, it turns out that it's a relatively monosyllabic administration. It's fascinating, I guess, to see just the level of thought and insight and introspection in the governor's mansion. The other comment that jumped out in one of these emails, I think you can see it there on the screen, not happening, just slow play him for now. And he, to his credit, he used the Public Records Act. He waited years and years, finally got the information, and then took it to the media to show the media what the governor's office thinks of elder care advocates and of the people of Oklahoma. I mean, look, if you don't want to take a meeting with somebody, it's one thing to just say, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it, or you're going to have to meet with somebody else. It's another thing to just mess with someone for a period of years, especially someone who is trying to stand up for the elderly in Oklahoma. And oh, by the way, some of the concerns that he had related to the Oklahoma State Department of Health. We've said it before on the program. I've said it before on the program. I'm going to keep saying this, and we're going to keep pulling on these strings. But the governor's office has known about problems at the Oklahoma State Department of Health for years, not for months. It's not a question of was it September or October. You remember when, at one point, I don't know, a month or two ago, that was the big question was, well, did they find out in September or did they find out in October? And I pointed out at the time on the radio program that is a false debate. They want us to have that debate. That is totally bogus. The reality is they've known for years there were problems at the State Department of Health, and I think their willingness to deal with it is basically summed up with that three-letter grunt, which seems to be, I don't know. I wonder what it's like to work actually in the governor's office. I mean, do they just communicate with each other sometimes just with grunts? And I don't know. Okay, so that is the hard week the Fallin administration has had, and it's going to be fascinating as the legislative session goes on. I will say this to try to see what the governor does to try to rescue some sort of legacy. I mean, you have the first female governor of Oklahoma. right? One of just a handful of Republican governors of Oklahoma, but the first female governor of Oklahoma. And I'm pointing that out because this is the sort of thing that people point out in the media. Who cares, right? What really is the test of a governor is what they do well in office, and the policies and the management the way they actually comport themselves in office. And well, we'll see. I don't know. I'm lapsing into, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. I'm just not going to say anything more. I mean, it really, I will say, I think it's tragic. Some might say a wasted 8 years. Okay, the Trump administration not wanting to waste any time at all. They have rolled out, I told you about this, if you're a longtime follower of the show, I told you on the heels of tax reform, the Trump administration wants to do two things. One is infrastructure. I'm not going to talk about that today, although I did post a little bit about that on the Facebook page. And the other is welfare reform. And they have rolled out this intriguing welfare reform proposal this week. And I just want to level with you. I'm not sure what I think about it. I would love to get your thoughts about their, they're calling this harvest boxes. Is that what it is? Yeah, America's Harvest Box. And this has been panned hard by the left and somewhat by the right. Nobody seems to like this proposal, except maybe me. I'm mixed on this. So here's what they say. They say, look, instead of giving people food stamps, which today aren't stamps, but they're also not food, instead of giving, it's an EBT card. It's made to look like a credit card. And the idea is that we don't want people to feel stigmatized when they are getting government cheese, right? When they're on welfare, we don't want people to feel stigmatized. And so we give them something that looks like a credit card, and they just can go and buy food with it. And, of course, you get a lot of criticism of how that works. First of all, there's rampant fraud in the EBT card, food stamp, basically SNAP program. Rampant fraud in it. And also, the Americans who are on welfare are more likely to be obese than Americans who are not on welfare, right? And that's just a fact that is out there in the public debate about food stamps and these programs, and it is scientifically true, right? That certain kinds of foods that people eat tend to make people obese, right? This is not complicated stuff. So, of course, the idea is, the Trump administration idea is, let's try, where possible, they wouldn't do this for everybody, but let's try to convert as much of this program as we can into actually giving people food, not a cash equivalent on a sort of preloaded credit card, right? Let's actually give people boxes of food, call it America's Harvest Box, and this will change how this program works. The left is, their hair is on fire over this, which does not make it a good idea. I just want to point that out. Sometimes people think that if the left doesn't like it, that makes it a good idea. That is not good reasoning, by the way. But they think this is insulting, condescending, and look, some people on the right have said basically the same thing, and this is a debate that's fascinated me for a while, because there's been the earlier discussion was, should you really limit how that money can be used? Not just food, but it has to be used on healthy food, or some percentage of it has to be used on healthy food or fresh produce or whatever. And you get this interesting debate. You have conservatives. It tends to be not 100%, but it tends to be conservatives who say, now we can push and pull people if they're on this program, and libertarians say, that's outrageous, you're interfering with people's choices. I've always come down this way. Look, if somebody is on welfare, if somebody is getting government help, right, if somebody is imposing on the taxpayers that way, I call me a bad person. I want them to know it. I want them to know that they're living off of somebody else. And look, there are very well-deserving people, and there are other people, but there are plenty of well-deserving people. I'm not saying it to suggest that there aren't real needs out there. But it's all about the incentives, right? Government programs the rest of our lives are all about the incentives. And I think it's good for people to know, right? If you are not getting if I get my paycheck, nobody should tell me how to spend my paycheck. I earned it. If you get a welfare check, if I get a welfare check, right, I didn't earn it. And if somebody wants to tell me how I can use that money, it's somebody else's money. Why can't they tell me how to use that money? I don't understand at all the libertarian perspective that, well, this flies in the face of libertarian ideas that you should allow people to make their own choices. It's not their money, right? It's money being given to people. I don't understand why it offends libertarians. Again, I've seen this debate play out in the past. This is kind of the debate that's informing this America's Harvest Box idea that the Trump administration rolled out. On the other hand, for liberals, they really want welfare checks to look like paychecks. Right? They like this idea that living off of government can just, it should have no stigma. It should not interfere with a person's quality of life at all. It shouldn't interfere with they should be able to think of it as a paycheck. And I have been around people who have thought of a welfare check as a paycheck, and this is profoundly wrong and dangerous. Not just wrong, but it's dangerous. It's bad incentives. All that to say, here's my concern about this America's Harvest Box idea. Here's my concern, and it goes to the incentives. So I've already said I don't have a problem limiting the SNAP because frankly, if the libertarians are right, we should just give people cash. Spend it however you want. Spend it on drugs, right? And there are probably some of my libertarian friends who would say that. If you're going to have a welfare program, just give people cash. Don't micromanage them at all. And I guess that would be a kind of a pure libertarian perspective. I disagree with that. Here's my problem with the Harvest Box. Where does the food come from that goes in the box? This is already a problem with the SNAP program. You know who the biggest supporters of the SNAP program, the food stamp program, are? Food producers, because this pumps money into their pockets. And frankly, it is food producers who make potato chips and soda and the kind of food that tends to be purchased with, and look, this is just the political reality. Everybody knows it in Washington, D.C. Those are the companies that fight the hardest to protect the status quo in this particular welfare program and to expand it, right? They're food companies, and particularly junk food companies, right? They're the beneficiaries. So when you go another step, right? And you don't just say, we're going to give people a preloaded card and they're going to have to buy food with it at the grocery store. So we're going to give people a box of food. My alarm bells go off this way. Well, where's the government going to buy that food, right? Who are going to be the new beneficiaries of the program? Will be whoever government is buying food from. It will be the next major, massive subsidy program for politically selected agricultural producers. They're the ones really on government cheese from this program, or at least they're the other side of the government cheese that gets spread around in these welfare programs. We've got to be attentive to that, and I do not know that the Trump administration is being all that thoughtful about that side of the incentives that would be set up by a program like this. But as I said, I'm not sure. I'm really curious. What do you think about the idea of converting some food stamps recipients to giving them boxes of food? Right? What do you think about that? I'm curious. Let me know. Okay. A couple of stories here to wrap things up. I just thought this was funny. The head of the EU, the president of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, is out there complaining about the claims made by particularly by people on the right in various European countries, made by supporters, some of the supporters of Brexit. By the way, one of the architects of Brexit is going to be here in Oklahoma just later on today. He's going to be in Oklahoma City later on today making a presentation. But Jean-Claude Juncker says the claims that the European Union is aspiring to be a quote-unquote super state are nonsense, as you can see from the BBC headline. I mean, okay, so all they want to have no borders internally, all the same regulation, common currency. Now they want a fiscal union, right? They want to have EU taxes and an EU military. It's clear they aspire to be a state. I guess Jean-Claude Juncker's problem is that he doesn't think it's going to be all that super. Okay, one more story here to round out the morning. This one is surprising, but it ties into what we were just talking about on welfare. I said the politics of welfare. It also ties into tax cuts. right? Tax reform, and now we have the conversation shifting to welfare reform, shifting to infrastructure. The politics of all of those issues benefit the White House. And so now we have the latest Politico Morning Consult poll showing that Republicans in the generic ballot, they ask people, who do you plan to vote for Congress? We haven't had primaries. We don't know who the candidates are going to be. We do know every seat in the U.S. House of Representatives and a third of the Senate are going to be up for election this November. And so they ask people, do you think you're going to vote for a Republican or a Democrat? And the Democrats have been leading that they call it a generic ballot test. The Democrats had been leading by quite a bit. I mean, 6 to 8%, which is quite a bit, and could be, if that's what it is going to the election, the portent of a wave election, flipping the Senate and the House to the Democrats. But Republicans have actually pulled even in the latest Politico Morning Consult poll. And again, not a huge surprise, with people actually getting bigger paychecks. I mean, millions of Americans getting bigger paychecks this month. Millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans getting bigger paychecks this month because of tax reform, and with the conversation moving on to things like welfare reform. Very popular. The things that the left says against welfare reform just don't fly with most Americans. Right, and so that's a good debate, and even infrastructure. Even as concerned as I am about the deficit and about the debt, even the infrastructure debate, I think, will benefit the White House. On the other hand, the left is answering back. Some former Bernie Sanders campaign staff have created, get this, you're going to love this, some former Bernie Sanders presidential campaign staff have created a new labor union for campaign staffers, so that they can guarantee that people who work on leftist political campaigns are paid a living wage, get all their benefits, don't have to work too hard. I think it's a great idea, don't you? Thanks for watching the Trent England Show this morning. I hope you'll tune in as we round out the week tomorrow.